This is fascinating because there's so many great musicians and artists out there. And I feel like you know this way better than I do, but I feel like a lot of the music is created from a place of yearning to want something, yearning for love or something they wanted or escaping pain. Do you think it's possible for great artists to produce and create amazing music that is connected around the world without some type of trauma or lack?
Well, I think the question is does anyone go through life without some kind of trauma? I mean, I think that I've never met anyone who could literally sit there and go, man, my life was perfect from start to finish, you know? I think that the desire to express yourself through the arts often comes from not feeling like you have a sort of natural pathway to explaining those things or figuring those things out, and often it's just a way to communicate and to express yourself in ways that conventional communication just doesn't work for you, or the environment isn't there for you. So yeah, I think that a lot of the arts, a lot of people who make art or express themselves, and it's across the board, not just in music. I mean, I know a few people who work in canvas, work in sculpting, who work in the more sort of like tactile arts. It's absolutely their way of seeing the world.
Why do you think it's easier to create art and express yourself than it is to sit across someone, open your heart, be vulnerable, and have a conversation eye to eye?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I can only speak from my experience. I didn't have the tools. I think you have to know yourself really well to be able to express yourself really well.
It's scary.
And I think that the fear kicks in because you're like, well, what if it doesn't come out the way I mean it? Or what if I don't really understand what I'm trying to achieve here? I mean, I'm still figuring it out. I mean, that's the beauty of life, right? We're all still figuring it out. And I think we're so results obsessed that we forget that actually, it's the learning that, as we established here, this is about learning from each other. And I'm here to learn from you. Yeah. So, it's like, I think we have to really be kinder to ourselves on that level. I think very quickly at a young age, it's like competitive sports. This is all healthy, by the way, but competitive sports, education, grades, results. And I think maybe part of where we're going in the future, hopefully, is that we can actually start to tandem that with this idea of what the inner voice is saying, because true art is when the inner voice and the outer voice meet in harmony. Yeah. That's what true art is. And I don't just mean singing, I mean any form of expression. Writing. When you write a piece of literature that's just like so mind-blowing and moving, that's that meeting that, or that, and it flows. Really. Yeah. And that's when people talk about the magic, that's the intangible. That's the magic place where great art gets created, is when we, somehow, for some reason, the stuff that gets in the way gets switched off. And I think when we're young and we don't know how to do that, not even when we're young, when we don't know how to do that or we ignore it, it's never off. And if it's not off, how do you express yourself in other means?
Sure.
Right? How do you open the lanes for the art to flow, for the music, the inspiration and things to flow? It's all just channels.
Right. And when you were going through this kind of period of time with the divorce and your parents, that's when you started to lean into the music and lean into this world? I was
always moved by it, and I was always motivated by it. But I think every kid is. I think, rhythm is a very natural place for us to land, and when we're figuring out what the world is, it's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah.
Dancing, things like that, it's a natural form of expression and joy. So I think if it takes hold, it's because it's serving a purpose. It became a purpose for me. It became a purpose to get up. It became a purpose to leave the house and walk to school, put my headphones on. My intention that day was not to hurry to school. My intention was to be able to listen to music on the way to school.
Wow. What year was this?
Get through school and listen to music on the way home.
Sure. What years was it?
I don't know. In the 80s. I mean, probably like, whenever I got my first Walkman, probably 10, 11 years old, something like that, I'm just figuring out, like, what do I need in order to just go somewhere that's mine, just my place. I still get an enormous amount of emotional satisfaction out of putting headphones on a plane or on a walk or something, because I know I'm the only one having that experience. It's entirely me. And, I think sometimes when you listen to music and it's so immersive that in your head everyone can hear what you hear, and then every now and then, just for fun, you'll pause and you'll hear the birds or the cars or everyone's just going about their life
Talking in your
like
head.
I love that, because there's something very comforting about knowing that life is just moving on around. It's a really good reminder that everyone's just doing the best they can and getting on with life.
Right.
And, you know, music just helps me do that. It continues to be this amazing place that allows me to feel things that are intangible. I don't know how to access those things sometimes without the help of
Music. Yeah. Was there ever an aha moment for you when you were playing, you know, growing up, or when you started interviewing people, where you were like, I cannot believe I'm playing with or interviewing this individual that I've been a fan of for so long?
Oh, there were so many. I mean, from a really early age, because when I was working in New Zealand, you know, there wasn't a huge amount of outlet for artists to kind of do press or whatever, but eventually they'd kind of all come through. So yeah, I mean, before I even went to London, I had this kind of show tape of, like, you know, I mean, I talked about it with him the other day. I mean, we're on our 20th plus interview now, nearly 30, almost 30 years I've been talking to Billy Corgan. And I remember in 1994 sitting on a grassy bank
In Auckland.
Yeah, the first ever big day out, where the band were playing just after Siamese Dream came out. They were on like 4:30 in the afternoon, and I'll never forget it. And like I knew that album, but I didn't really. But I kind of fell in love with him before I really got the band, and that was a big thing for me. Like, I interviewed him and just thought, something about this guy is like, it's just really got some crazy vibe about him, aura about him. And then I heard the music and I made the connection between the two. And then that album has been my companion my whole life. So that was crucial. I mean, being at Radio 1 and getting that first JayZ conversation was a game changer.
What was that like?
It just changed everything for me.
What year was that?
Well, it actually was the second. Well, the first one happened around Blueprint 3, but the one that really was the game changer was the second or third one, which was around Magna Carta Holy Grail at Abbey Road. And just, yeah, I reckon he was just so generous and thoughtful and unafraid of the questions, and really willing to go there, and just like he'd made the decision to do it. And so he came in without any armor on.
He didn't have some PR responses and...
Yeah, it fell away immediately. It felt immediately like we could have talked for hours and hours and hours and hours. And we did. We talked for like 2 hours. And I remember after that day, like, I was like, okay, yeah, you can do this. Like, you can...
Right. He was probably the biggest in the world at the time, right?
Yeah, and you can go into the room with him, and he just made me feel in that moment like it was a worthwhile experience. And, you know, it's different for you because you've built this amazing experience where people want to come into this room with you. You've established through really thoughtful, great conversation and very smart kind of sort of complimentary branding and everything else. So it's like, oh, I want to go on that. Like, I was excited to be asked, you know.
Yeah.
I knew it would be a great use of time for me, at least. But most people start, at least back in the day before podcasts were really the avenue, you really came in on everybody else's sort of priority list, and you're a tool. Like, you got to promote this record, you got to, ask these questions, do this job. So I was I never felt like I really had much of a role to play beyond kind of doing my job. And the JayZ one was a big one for me, where I felt like, you know what, beyond what the label needs, what the BBC needs, what the audience expects, just that experience of me and this person I admire with to such a degree, it's a huge degree, that was enough. It made me feel like you can do this. Like, you can be of value to people in this environment. You know?
Did you ever have doubts before that, or did you have insecurities when these artists would come in? Like, okay, I've got to deliver, and what if they don't like me? And
not just that, man. I mean, I think a lot of that was what drove some of my techniques, was the fear that I had to prove myself, right? I had to leave and make an impression. All these things. It's just, dude, we just spend so much time focused on what if we fail, that you forget that actually the reason you're there in the first place is because something inside of you believes that you can be of value, that you can succeed in whatever capacity others think is success, right? And so we forget that, and we bury that deep down within, and that's why execution is so hard. That's why people make and don't execute.
That's true. But it sounds like that gave you a big confidence boost. It gave you more belief in yourself after that JayZ interview.
Yeah, it's huge. And then everything kind of kicked off from there, and it was like Kanye and then Eminem all within a sort of 6-month period. And then
really,
I feel like that was sort of the moment when a chain of events sort of unfolded that ended up, you know, positioning me at Apple and moving to Los Angeles. Yeah.
Was that how much earlier was that before you moved to LA?
It's like 2012, 2013. So if you think about it,
3 years before.
yeah, but if you think about it in terms of the conversations began in 2014, it really was only about a year.
Wow.
Because then I did Rick Rubin, who'd never done anything really on camera and hadn't done an interview, at least to my knowledge, in a long time. And now obviously Rick has built a beautiful, wonderful empire of conversations and books. And I mean, he just makes the world better by sharing his knowledge. But at the time, it just didn't seem to be what he was focused on. So we had this cool Shangri-La moment, and that was big. And so it just...
So that a couple year period, there's a lot of big kind of powerful conversations you got to have with people that really didn't open up.
Yeah.
What do you think allowed you to be able to create those iconic conversations in that short period of time and allowed you to book them and for them to want to open up vulnerably and share?
Well, JayZ is what allowed it. I mean, he's the one who said yes in the first place, and he's the one who encouraged us to put it on YouTube, which I had no presence on YouTube. In fact, I was like, well, YouTube's for like short form comedy. And he was like, nah, we should put like this hour-long interview up on YouTube, see if people like it. And he really encouraged that. So we did that, and then people watched it. And then
he kind of gave you the credibility, the stamp of approval.
Yeah, he just was like, if I'm going to do one or maybe two of these things, I want everyone to see it. So put it where the audience is, right? Valuable lesson. Put it where the audience is, right? This is about visibility. I want people to know my music's out. I want people to know what it's about. Right, I'm chosen you to have one of these rare conversations. Let's put it everywhere. I'm like, of course, makes total sense. Like, duh. Right, but at the time, I'm being like super overly curatorial in the whole experience out of fear, because I'm like, what if I put my stuff on YouTube and people don't care?
Right.
It's all that stuff. It's all that stuff. And he just cut through it. Was like, no one has time for that. Put it up. So we put it up. It happened, and then, I mean, there's luck involved, there's timing involved, but the truth is, you know. When I spoke to Kanye West around the Yeezus project, which was quite a significant conversation at the time, where he really sort of did a lot of talking to camera and really addressed primarily the fashion industry and kind of outlined what he was going to do.
Right.
At the time, you know, we had been putting breadcrumbs around the place for a while. Like I'd spent the last couple of years trying to kind of get to him and see if he did want to talk. Yeah, again, he hadn't spoken for 2 or 3 years at that time. It was a bit of a media blackout for him. He was just making music and wasn't really doing many interviews. And so I was just...
But you were putting feelers out, sending it to his team or people he knew and say, hey, I'd love to have him on.
We still do that. I mean, I made a call yesterday to try to get something teed up that won't happen for another year.
Really?
All the time.
But now you're running up Apple Music. Isn't it easier to get these artists who want to promote a new album?
Not the point though. So the point isn't to wait for them to want to promote the album. The point is to get the conversation that is of most value.
Amen.
Right? The point is to have the conversation with someone that is really impactful. And you can have that when there's something to promote. That's where it's our job to get behind the record or behind the project and get inside the human experience. But, you know, there's someone I've wanted to talk to my entire life.
You still haven't had a conversation with.
Who's an older artist who is like a ghost cat, like Walter Mitty, like waiting for the cat to come out of the, you know. And I'm 3, 4 conversations in several years into trying to make that happen. That's part of it. It's the fun part of it.
I know. A lot of it's timing. There's been guests I've been trying to get for 10 years that I have been on top of the publicist that I have 5 relationships with their closest, like I'm in the mix somehow, but it just hasn't work timing.
Bill's the same, you know. Bill Simmons, a good friend of mine, he's the same. We talk about it. He's like, man, you know, it's waited years to get that one. It's like, it's how it goes.
He's massive, yeah.
By the way, it's whack to rest on your laurels, and anything you've achieved is done.
Yeah, it's over with. You got to keep building it.
Done. It belongs. It exists. It's there. You know, Neil Young said something really cool to me when I talked to him, and I had this awesome conversation with him and Rick Rubin. And Neil Young said to me, I tried to ask him about Harvest, and he was like, yeah, you know, I'll give you like a minute about Harvest, but anything beyond that, you gotta have to ask that guy. And I'm like, who's that guy? He's like, that guy who made that album. He's still back there. Just gotta go find him. And I'm like, well, how do I find him? He's like, I don't know. Go back there.
Somewhere back there.
He's like, there's been thousands of me. I don't know what that guy thinks about Harvest anymore. I know what I think, and I'll give you a soundbite on it. But I'm thinking about this today, right now.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's cool. The more time I spend doing it, the more I realize it's just magical.
It's almost spiritual.
It's pure magic. It finds you when you need it. It stays with you. It holds you. It comes out of you. It is. I truly think it is.